now for the World Brief and a review of some of today's newspapers. And of course, let's start with the World Brief. Again, unfortunately, we begin with the devastating news following that plane crash in Washington, D.C. The black boxes now for the commercial flight that crashed into a military helicopter in Washington, D.C. have been located as questions mount about staffing and other close calls at the airport where the plane was landing. Now, normally, 2 people manage air traffic control for helicopters and airplanes flying in the area, one of the most controlled airspaces in the world. But only one person was on duty at the Reagan Washington National Airport on Wednesday at the time of the crash. There are no survivors after this collision between that passenger jet and Army helicopter. The aircraft, which was flying from Wichita, Kansas, was carrying 64 people, while 3 soldiers were aboard the helicopter. It is the deadliest plane incident in America since 2001. Several members of the figure skating community were also aboard the jet, returning from a developmental camp in Wichita, including 2 1994 world champions. With no official cause yet, the National Transport Safety Board, which is leading the probe into the collision, hopes to have a preliminary report ready within 30 days. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, without evidence, has placed the blame for the crash on democratic diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful one, restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Well, a reminder at this point that there is no evidence of the cause of the plane crash yet. And just before we move on to the story, I think it is really important for people to understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion seeks to do. Because he talked, as we heard US President Donald Trump say, that you need the smartest people in the room, you need the most qualified. And I don't think anybody is debating that point. But what we also need to understand is that often there is more than one smartest person in the room. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of DEI is that when you have many qualified people, when you need to choose one, you shouldn't just default go to one person. You shouldn't just default go to a white man because they are a white man. If there are a whole host of qualified candidates, DEI makes it so that you level the playing field, so that other people who are just as competent but from different backgrounds should also be highlighted. And I think a lot of criticism of DEI makes people believe that because somebody is a woman or of color or physically has challenges, that could be a reason for them getting a job that they don't deserve. And that's not actually the case. That's not the case at all. And it shouldn't be something that we continue to perpetuate. Staying with the World Brief and moving on to Mexico now. And the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, has written a letter to Google asking the firm to reconsider its decision to rename the Gulf of Mexico. US President Donald Trump signed an executive order requiring the body of water, which is bordered by the United States, Cuba, and Mexico, to be renamed the Gulf of America in his first week in office. But it will only appear on Google Maps with the new name for people based in the United States. Elsewhere in the world, it will retain its current name, which has been used for hundreds of years. Now, there is no international organization responsible for the naming of bodies of water, but Mexico argues the US cannot legally change the Gulf's name because the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea dictates that an individual country's sovereign territory only extends up to 12 nautical miles from their coastline.
And most of those conventions come from a book written many, many years ago about the sea by Grocio, which is Free Sea, actually.
Yes.
Which talks about, sovereignty levels as regards, the doctrines of the sea and all of that. And, I mean, Grocio's text about the Free Sea, and the waters. Is exactly, the international text for
Agreed.
that. So Trump can ramble up all he wants to ramble up. But I mean, are you surprised?
I'm not, but we will come back to you both for analysis. We've got one more story on the World Brief before we come back to chat. Finally, returning to the African continent, and Kone Nanga, who is the leader of an alliance of rebel groups, including the M23, whose fighters have captured Goma, the biggest city in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and a major trading hub on its border with Rwanda, has vowed to continue their offensive all the way to the capital, Kinshasa. He says their ultimate aim was to topple President Felix Tshisekedi's government. Now, unconfirmed reports say that the Rwanda-backed rebels are currently advancing towards Bukavu, the second biggest city in the mineral-rich East, despite international calls for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, South Africa and Rwanda's already fraught diplomatic relations have worsened after President Cyril Ramaphosa accused the alleged Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group of killing 13 South African peacekeepers in eastern DRC. Ramaphosa warned that further attacks on its troops would be considered a declaration of war. In response, Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame, accused South Africa of being part of a force helping the Congolese government to fight against its own people.
Okay, so like I was saying, I mean, what do you expect from a very divisive Trump? A very divisive human being that doesn't even respect protocols. Investigations are not out. You're already blaming it on DEI. And I'm happy that you've been able to educate a lot of people, because what the right wing have sold to people is that DEI means inclusive and also mean gay people and all of that.
Yes.
No, it also means people from lower,
income backgrounds.
Mothers
and children.
Mothers and children and all that. But the parts that suits the right wingers that they sell to each other is gay people and lesbian people. That's why they say, when they say DEI, this is all over. So you can see the joke of what Trump is, the shame he has put out to America. At first, he made a tweet on Truth Social saying that when the helicopter was coming, why didn't he dock for the plane? I mean, the guy doesn't even understand how things are. And America voted this one as president.
And he's also talking about, needing the smartest person in the room, the best people in the room.
Obviously, he speaks volumes. So did he pick the smartest person in the room when you pick a major to head a position as the Secretary of Defense, the position that used to be headed by one of the brightest generals, Lloyd Austin before, highly ranked man. You just put a major in the National Guard. So it's Pete Hegseth with his drinking badge and women batching. Is he one of the smartest heads in the room?
Is it RFK?
It's RFK that can't even say if healthcare is a fundamental human right. One of the smartest, that put a lot of conspiracy theories about food and vaccines that he can't substantiate. Is that one of the smartest heads in the room? You can see what the joke America is doing. Let me talk about Congo real quickly.
Sure.
These M23 guys, people need to call out Kagame. Kagame that is pushing around, that recently they set up an African bureau in Rwanda for intergovernmental teaching and relation. Kagame should be watched. He's becoming a pariah in Africa. Those M23 are now saying that they want to move up to Kinshasa. So Kagame wants to take another sovereign nation and everybody will be looking at him. We must speak against Kagame. I'm happy about what the singer Dems has done. She canceled a concert in Rwanda. Everybody must boycott Rwanda because this was the world that was speaking against what happened in the 90s in Rwanda, in Srebrenica. And now Kagame too has become that because of your Tutsis alienation. They must find a way to settle it. And I was in support of what Tshisekedi said by not attending that meeting. And I'm happy about Cyril Ramaphosa. Everybody should come out and call him to order. You want to topple an independent sovereign nation?
Dr. Abati.
Okay, let me talk about President Claudia Sheinbaum saying that Google should not rename the map. Google has not replied, but Google has made it very clear that it's the local name of the country for the territorial sea that will be adopted in a particular country. President Sheinbaum also said, look, America can only exercise its authorities within 12 nautical miles. Well, that's the definition of the territorial sea under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that is called UNCLOS. UNCLOS was signed in 1982. It became operational in 1994. Now, under UNCLOS, UNCLOS 1, UNCLOS 2, UNCLOS 3, and what was signed in 1994, the International Law of the Sea, it defines territorial sea. Territorial sea extends to 12 nautical miles. It defines also what is called the contiguous zone, which is the hot pursuit area. It also goes another additional 12 nautical miles. You have the exclusive economic zone, which goes another 200 miles. You have also what is called the continental shelf, which goes another 200 miles. So under Article 76, that is the operative principle in law, Article 76, 1 to 10, that's where this whole territory thing is defined. I think in principle, that's what the president of Mexico is referring to. You can call Gulf of America, if you like, within your own region, within all the zones that are described under the UNCLOS law, but you cannot extend it to other countries, either Mexico or Cuba. And I think she's right on the point of international law. Number two is that, well, Sheinbaum has now said, oh, we too can declare Mexicana Americana, something like that. Mexican American, describing the whole of North America. Well, they have an option. They can go to the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, which is based in Budapest, I think, Budapest, somewhere in Germany. It's based somewhere in Germany.
Hungary.
Yeah, Hungary, wherever, but it's in Germany.
Okay.
They have the option to go there and challenge the United States because your territorial sea, your exclusive economic zone is a matter of international law. Unfortunately, of course, maybe President Trump does not know anything about the international law of the sea. That's the point about that. As for Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, in other words, the eastern part of DRC, yeah. Now the gentleman saying they are going to plant their own flag in Kinshasa. Kinshasa is 2,600 miles away from Goma. Already they have started an administration in Goma. They've taken control. They are moving towards Bukavu, the second largest city in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. But it will be quite a challenge to get to the capital. But they did it before. After all, Mobutu Sese Seko was removed by Rwandan-backed forces that went all the way to Kinshasa to remove him. The question is, will history repeat itself? However, the thing that should be feared is the escalation of the conflict. Now bringing in Rwanda in conflict with South Africa, and President Kagame saying that if South Africa is complaining about peacekeepers being killed, if he wants to worry about peacekeeping, that's fine. But if he wants to challenge Rwanda, they too are ready to challenge South Africa. That's an escalation in the conflict. And if that happens, you have a blowout in that eastern, southern corridor of Africa. And I think this is why it's important that the international community should act swiftly. Why should they act swiftly? There's already a humanitarian crisis. Over 100,000, 400,000 persons have already been displaced. There's a humanitarian crisis already in Goma. If it's spreads to Bukavu, it spreads to other areas. We don't want a situation where the United Nations or the United States will now be saying, oh, we have an international crisis, humanitarian crisis in DRC. They've not solved the one in Sudan. They've not addressed the one in Libya. They have not done anything about the one in Gaza. So the international community needs to wake up. As for Biden, I rely on the statement made by Pete Buttigieg. the transportation secretary under Biden, who said that, look, this man is despicable. People have died. The only thing you have to say is they are blaming Biden's policies on DEI. You are blaming Obama's policies with regard to aviation. He said he brought up aviation standards after taking power in 2017. Obama collapsed everything before him. He took it to extraordinary. Biden came, he collapsed it. And then, he is now here to improve on standards. Is that the thing to say? Although he said a moment of silence should be observed, but I think President Biden is insensitive. President Trump is insensitive, and what he said was completely out of place. Representative Ilhan Omar also said that this is racist, this is crude, and I think those persons are in order.
Indeed. All righty, well, let's move on to the newspaper headlines across the globe. We begin here in Nigeria, the front cover of This Day. And This Day, just to continue on, looks at what we saw in the central bank. Olayemi Cardoso saying that despite the volatility of the Naira in recent years, the international community believe that the currency is now reflective of its real rate. And the CBN governor also said that he is optimistic for the future when it comes to this. Also, there is this update in this case between First Bank and GHL. The New Telegraph now leads with the former head of state, Abdulsalami Abubakar, saying that he is happy that his administration delivered the present democratic dispensation in Nigeria. We do, of course, know that Abubakar, as military head of state, did hand power to Olusegun Obasanjo as civilian president in 1999. The former head of state also spoke on Thursday at a book launch. That book is called 100 Years of Political Parties, The Evolution in Nigeria, The Imperative of Nigeria's Political Stabilities, Issues and Solutions by the Inter-Party Advisory Council. Still on the PDP political crisis, and the Punch has members of the National Working Committee and the National Executive Committee wading into this rift between the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike and the Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed. Some have called on both leaders to close rank and rebuild the party ahead of the next election cycle in 2027, while others argue the rift between them was personal and as such would have no impact on the fortunes of the party at the polls in 2 years' time. Let's take a look at The Guardian. Its headline says that there is optimism as West African cities receive $50 billion in a fresh bid for electricity. In terms of Africa's potential, the continent holds 60% of the world's most attractive solar resources. Meanwhile, the federal government has unveiled a $23.2 billion energy compact and targets $15.5 billion private investment. The Daily Trust reports on the ongoing controversy surrounding the extension of the tenure of the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun. He is yet to abate now, following fresh calls for his resignation or his sacking. Now, in addition to the human rights activist Omoyele Sowore, who insists that Egbetokun's stay in office as IGP is illegal, some senior police officers have also raised concerns, saying that the extension has killed career growth for other police officers. Egbetokun was supposed to have left the police service on the 4th of September 2024 when he turned 60, but he was handed an extension of 4 years in office by the president after the law regarding appointment into the IGP's office was amended by the National Assembly. In the United Kingdom, the Daily Mail has Keir Starmer, who is under pressure to get serious about growth and sign off on 2 North Sea oil fields controversially blocked by the courts. In the first set of Labour's pledges to make economic growth its number one priority, a court in Scotland yesterday ruled that the approval of the huge projects by the Conservatives was unlawful. The decision came after Ed Miliband withdrew government legal support last year for the companies involved in a court battle with environmental campaigners. Now, Kemi Badenoch described the court's ruling as an act of self-harm and warned that the hijacking of the law by the Green Lobby was killing growth. And she also told the Labour leader that the Labour government, who were banging on about growth just yesterday, are too scared to fight for the oil and gas fields that deliver energy, security and jobs for thousands of people. And finally, the Metro's headline referred to the UK as a nation of shoplifters, that as shoplifting in England and Wales has surged to an all-time high, with nearly 500,000 cases reported over the past 12 months. A total of 492,914 offences were logged by police in the year to September 2024. That's up 23% from the previous year. And the figure is the highest since current records began. Those are your papers from around the world today.
Adefemi, you raised a number of stories, looking at, world news.
Yes.
Well, is there any particular story you want us to reflect on in the meantime?
Well, where we can start actually perhaps would be GHL, because we weren't able to talk about it at the very beginning of the show, and it was on the front page of this day. So we can start there, and then also we can move on to different stories happening. We heard the comments from the central bank governor, which we actually spoke about at length. The PDP has touched on what's going on. The Punch has touched on what's going on in the PDP. The Guardian is also looking at this electricity and all of that situation to have. And then also there's the UK papers, Keir Starmer criticised by Kemi Badenoch, essentially saying just yesterday you people were saying that you want to grow growth and now you don't want to back this oil deal. So a lot to discuss there.
Okay, so a couple of things. The GHL one, the judgment is finally out in public view between page 73 to
139.
139.
It's a 139 page.
139 page, but most of the judge's comments and the judgment was between from 73 to 139. The judge knocked out, the issue of the Mareva, and he spoke about it extensively there and all of that. And I said that because prior to this time, the FBN Council was also talking about another judgment that was prior, that there was a case of 6 to 11 there, but the judge also just talked about two issues of the Mareva. And there's a reportage that GHL says that the banks are really complying with the Mareva order. Although there's still a lot of talk as regards that some people are saying, oh no, they are not still out of the shackles yet and all of that. But GHL, that was involved in this, says that the banks are already complying, with the Mareva order. So, and I think that circumspectly, it is only right for media houses, to read the entire judgment, before, coming to conclusions. They're also talking about the First Bank, that they're still going to push for, litigations as regards defamation, and as regards the position of shares and things like that and all of that. When we see all the facts and the details of that judgment, we'll push it out there. Yeah. The second case I'd like to talk about is the Egbetoko case. Yes, there might have been a law that says, okay, the police IG can stay a 4-year tenure. But I would like to ask IG Egbetoko something this morning. If he was one of those Deputy Inspector General of Police that was waiting a week to become the IG, and the person just preceding you was told that he would spend 4 years there when they hit even their retirement age and they supersede their retirement age, and you are, not allowed to become IG, how is it going to make you feel?
Especially if you're 56 years old, just thinking an extra 4 years.
In an extra 4 years. How is it going to make you feel? Yeah. So how is it going to make you feel? It's probably the way the likes of Frank Oba are feeling today. And other people circling around. So yes, he might have been right with the law that, okay, they have made the law and they have passed it, that he should do a full tenure. But as regards the feeling as a human being, how is it going to make him feel? I think those are the conversations. Dr. Abate, I know you want to start on a couple of issues.
Oh, no, okay. Basically on the General Hydrocarbons case. Now, the judgment delivered, the ruling delivered by Justice Dikpeolu is 139 pages long. But if you want to get the substance of it, of the main ruling, you go from page 73 to 139. Now, what is the point I want to make about that? Yesterday, I stayed with the principles with regard to Mareva injunction because it is the height of illiteracy for people to comment on a judgment, on a ruling that they have not read. But I think that the media in Nigeria, is so quick to just jump to conclusions on the basis of received information, whereas, in principle, you don't just professionally go and comment on a ruling that you have not read. I think that going forward, there's also a statement here for journalists in terms of how they interpret the rulings of the court. Many of our media houses, unfortunately, not having judicial desks anymore or persons competent enough to do a judicial review. Now, The last paragraph in Justice Dikpeolu's ruling said, "This is the ruling of the court." Now, that emphatic declarative statement in that ruling was saying that the Mareva order granted on December 30th of 2024 had been set aside with regard to the second to the fifth respondent in that matter. That in itself is declaratory enough. That's number one. Number two is to say that General Hydrocarbons has now issued a statement saying that, its customers, its stakeholders, its suppliers, the banks are now respecting the ruling of the court. Well, that should not come as a surprise, because ordinarily, in any jurisdiction, court proclamations are supposed to be respected and obeyed. It's only in Nigeria that even government disobeys the court of law. And obeying the court of law in terms of its rulings, I think is perfectly in order. The number 3 point to make is that these stakeholders, these suppliers, these persons who are involved with General Hydrocarbons, they have now, the confidence has now been restored. Because the effect of the Mareva injunction, which I have described as a freezing order, that's what it is. I'm not the one giving it a label. Is that now these, customers, suppliers, stakeholders, they can now do business with General Hydrocarbons. Their confidence has been restored. Under the principle known, the doctrine of least pendens, there's something called the doctrine of least pendens. Under the doctrine of least pendens, when a matter is before the court, you really cannot allow, the owner of the assets to do business in the normal way. Let me put it like that in the layman's language. So that confidence has been restored. And I think that, General Hydrocarbons is in order to say, now our business is not encumbered. However, as I said yesterday, there are still other issues to be resolved. There is a pending arbitration that have been determined by Justice Alagoa. There are also other things that can be resolved. But in business, the thing that people should realize is that in business, there are usually conflicts. Whether it's commercial law you are looking at or contract law that you are looking at, the two issues can be determined either through legal proceedings or through arbitration. It is now for the parties involved in the dispute to go ahead. Now, if they pursue legal proceedings, the High Court is the court of first instance. And what that means is that analysts and media cannot reach any peremptory, preliminary, conclusive, decisions away from the face of the court. That will be contemptuous. Let the court determine if that is what is chosen, or the matter is resolved through arbitration.